projects at over 12 gigawatts. It is why we invest in grid-scale transmission, storage, and logistics, and why we innovate around how we finance this transformation. In our paper, Africa's Pragmatic Path to Net Zero, we call for tools that will accelerate development of bankable projects and unlock institutional capital. We're delivering on that through partnership with the Green Climate Fund to deploy blended capital with forced loss, capital to crowd in long-term capital from African pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and from global markets. Because this is not just about vision, it's about execution. Capital is not alone. We need institutions with local credibility, long-term commitment, and development focus. That is the role of African multilateral financial institutions. Our sister institutions across the continent are constantly turning complexity into structures and aligning capital behind it to deliver Africa's prosperity. We must be empowered and capitalized, not bypassed, in delivering Africa's transformation because we access capital from markets with our operations. And to finance this transformation, we must also look inward. Africa is home to over $4 trillion of domestic capital pools in pensions, reserves, and sovereign wealth funds. Yet this remains offshore, especially our reserves, due to regulatory constraints and market fragmentation. We must mobilize these domestic capital pools to finance infrastructure that unlocks our natural capital, from clean energy to agriculture, carbon markets, and green minerals. This requires regulatory reform to enable structured intermediation so that African capital flows into African development priorities. This is a call to action and a respectful call on President Ruto, in his role as chair of the African Union Committee on Climate Change, to use his convening power to champion these enabling reforms. We need to move our resources to investments within the continent. We need to find ways to get our foreign reserves to invest on the continent. We need to find ways for structural transformation to move from just government securities into projects in infrastructure and industry. And we're happy to work with you at the African Multilateral Financial Institutions to build on this initiative, to unlock long-term African capital for long-term African prosperity. Together, we can bridge the gap between Africa's vast potential and Africa's realized prosperity. Let me close with this. To harness Africa's natural capital, we must move from extraction to transformation. Build African value chains for carbon credits, fertilizers, green copper, and steel. We must scale infrastructure and logistics, retain value on the continent, mobilize African capital through regulatory reforms and structured intermediation. Natural capital must mean not just conservation, but transformation. The time for pilots are over. The time for fragmented ambition is past. We need scale. We need infrastructure. We need African-led execution financed by African capital and backed by global partnership. And it begins with all of us here in this room today. Thank you. And now, it is my honor to invite Right Honorable David Lammy, MP, Secretary of State, Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs, to share his reflections on how the UK can partner with Africa to build the future we all need.
Well, Your Excellency, President Ruto, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it's a great pleasure to be here today, and thank you to Samala and the team behind the Africa debate for bringing us all together. This week it's 25 years since I was first elected the Member of Parliament for Tottenham. and therefore begun my journey in public life. So I want to start by looking back for just a moment in time. I was a Member of Parliament and then a junior minister in the governments of Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. And they were both very, very focused on Africa and the continent of Africa. However, when I look back on that period, it was most definitely, principally, through the lens of development and aid. This was the era of the Jubilee debt campaign. It was absolutely the era of the Millennium Development Goals. Make poverty history was the theme of the day. And the G8 summit in Gleneagles in 2005, implementing many of the recommendation of Blair's Commission for Africa. These efforts left, of course, a legacy. In 2000, almost 2/3 of all sub-Saharan Africans lived on under $3 a day. By 2010, when Gordon Brown left office, the figure was under half. But when I became Foreign Secretary last year, I wanted to modernize our approach to Africa, modernize our approach to development. I, of course, had been traveling to the continent for many, many years. The first country I ever visited was Kenya. But I'd seen the transformation of cities and communities, all brimming with huge potential. And I suppose I also benefited from my own heritage in the global south. My parents hailed from Guyana. And so I understood some of the frustrations of countries and communities when it felt like the West was ignoring people or not listening to people, not understanding what they really needed. I wanted to change that and to reset relations then with the global South, and particularly with Africa, and to implement a new approach. Partnership, not paternalism. Genuine partnership is by definition between two equals, each respecting the other. So in this job, I've tried to show that respect. And in the past year, I've visited 8 African countries. The first foreign secretary to visit South Africa or Morocco since William Hague, and the first foreign secretary ever to visit the great country of Chad. And on my first visit to the continent as foreign secretary, I launched consultations on our new Africa approach, a 5-month listening exercise, hearing from governments, from civil society and diaspora communities, from businesses and universities, from Cape Town to Cairo, from Dakar to Djibouti, what they valued, what they wanted to see from Britain. We needed to listen, and I thank you all for your engagement over the course of this progress and for what you told us, what we needed to hear. The message actually didn't surprise me, because what African people want from Britain is exactly what British people want from Africa. You want we want growth. And not just any form of growth, a jump in numbers on a spreadsheet for a year or two, but a secure, sustainable growth for everyone. High quality job, affordable prices, citizens living better lives than those of their ancestors. You want, we want opportunity. Opportunity arising from our respective strengths, like the British education system, like, of course, the City of London, the incredible natural assets and energized young people across Africa, and our collective commitment to multilateralism. And you want and we want partnerships. Partnerships that harness our deep historic ties and the array of personal connections that exist between us. But partnerships that also continue to grow and deepen as we both invest in them. That's just a snapshot of a detailed piece of work, but of course the work can only be beginning. The real test of our Africa approach, and this was clear in the consultation as well, is how we put into practice, because talk is cheap, it's actions in the end that count. I'm excited by the deals driving growth that we've been delivering so far. A new strategic partnership with Nigeria, a new growth plan with South Africa, a new partnership with Morocco, joint work on a new AI strategy in Ghana, and new investments in Tanzania and, of course, in Kenya, announced in the first East Africa Trade and Investment Forum here in London in May. And thanks to our developing countries trading scheme and free trade agreements with many African countries, almost 15 billion of goods were exported from Africa to Britain, tariff-free last year. And following the publication of the British government's new trade strategy, we will further simplify the rules of the DCTS scheme, which benefits 38 African countries, and review our tariffs with South Africa, Egypt, Morocco, and Tunisia. The trade strategies reinforces Britain's belief in the power of free trade, and the largest free trade area in the world is Africa's. And that's why we back the rollout of the African Continent Free Trade Agreement, reducing barriers to intra-African trade through support in areas like digital, trade and custom cooperation. And we will increase opportunities for British firms to play their part, just as it will increase prosperity in Africa. The British businesses and investors in this room have a big part to play. And I want our ambassadors, our high commissioners, working closely with you so that together we can play a confident role in investing more and supporting the growth of the African market. So more trade, more investment. This is the best path to prosperity for all. And there is a role, of course, for development as well, but this has to be a modernized approach to development, recognizing that fundamentally development is about growth. Development is about jobs. Development is about business. The modern development expert needs to have a mindset of an investor, not a donor. Looking for the best return, not offering the biggest handout. And it's in that spirit that British International Investment recently signed an MOU with South Africa's Public Investment Corporation, one of Africa's largest asset managers, and this week agreed to support a new Wave Money Mobile, an exciting African fintech unicorn. And it's also in that spirit that Britain is co-hosting the next Global Fund Replenishment Summit in South Africa. And just last week, I made a $1.25 billion pledge to the recent Gavi replenishment in Brussels, the largest of any sovereign donor. That work will save lives, many, many millions, but it will also unlock economic value. Every pound given to Gavi drives £54 in wider economic benefit, and crucially, it unlocks value in Britain and Africa. Gavi works closely with cutting-edge British pharmaceutical firms like GSK, and it's also designed the first African vaccine manufacturing accelerator, which is using industry partnerships to deliver vaccines for Africa. Vaccines, and this is very important because people talked about that during the COVID pandemic. They asked the question, why? Why are we failing, the West failing to vaccinate the African continent? And that was an important question. But there was a second question. Why has the African continent not got its own manufacturing capability? And that is what we now need to deliver in Africa. Working with partners like Nigeria, we're pushing for organizations like Gavi and the Global Fund to work together and reform so that their work has national ownership at its heart. National ownership is similarly important when it comes to reforming wider international finance, especially for climate and nature. And thank you, President Ruto, for your leadership on the climate issue particularly. The theme of your conference is precisely the right framing. Africa has natural capital, but it cannot unlock this if we make it impossibly challenging for states to access the finance that they need. At the recent Development Finance Summit in Seville, we were again pushing for reforms of the multilateral development banks and the IMF. We have to mobilize private capital and use guarantees to unlock more funds, to empower regional development banks like the African Development Bank, where developing countries have more of a voice, to tackle unsustainable debt, to work with the city to bring innovations like disaster risk insurance and strengthen local capital markets. One example of what this can mean comes from Sierra Leone, where I can announce £2 million worth of British government investment to back a mangrove restoration project by West Africa Blue. The project protects over 90,000 hectares of mangrove estuaries, improving coastal and community resilience, but it's also demonstrating how this model can be commercially viable, unlocking future investment in similar projects in the future. And finally, alongside our work on trade, on investment and development finance, we've heard the clear message from the consultation on illicit finance as well. I know that this message is not new. For years, friends in Africa have been saying Britain needs to do more to tackle dirty money. Kleptocrats and money launderers rob all our citizens of wealth and security. And now the government is listening too. That's why I've started imposing sanctions on crooks who siphon off public money for themselves, like Isabel dos Santos of Angola, Kamlesh Patni's illicit gold smuggling network. And that's why I've also announced that London will be hosting a Countering Illicit Finance Summit, bringing together a broad range and a broad coalition from the global north and the global south to drive these criminals out of our economies. Friends, I said the messages of our recent consultations were that Africa wanted more growth, Africa wanted more opportunities, Africa wanted more partnerships. In effect, Africa wants Britain to help them to have more choices. Choices over who to do business with, because it's choices which matter in a volatile geopolitical age. Britain wants choices too, and I believe that given a choice, more and more British businesses and investors will be choosing Africa in the coming years. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from an African voice.
As we seek ways to transform Africa's growth agenda, we must reflect on and remain alive to global economic structures, emerging trends, patterns of value creation, and our prevailing realities at home, both in Kenya and in Africa. Across the world, the architecture of economic value creation is shifting in profound ways. Here, in the United Kingdom, for instance, more than 80% of GDP in 2023 was generated by services sectors such as finance, professional services, technology, and retail. Traditional sectors like agriculture and extractives accounted for less than 2% of GDP. This reality is not unique to the UK. In many upper middle income economies such as Brazil, China, Mexico, Thailand, and many others, services now account for more than 50% of their gross domestic product. The leading drivers of value creation in these economies are no longer extractives or primary industries, but sectors that leverage knowledge, innovation, and human capital. This trend signals that the future of global economic competitiveness lies in investing in services, technology, and human capacity to innovate and solve complex challenges. Nonetheless, we must also recognize that primary industries and manufacturing remain vital and indispensable, especially for developing economies. In sub-Saharan Africa, agriculture still employs nearly half the workforce and contributes between 20 and 40% of GDP on average. In Kenya, agriculture contributes 22% to our gross domestic product, while more than 40% of our population is employed both directly and indirectly in the sector. In fact, 70% of our rural population depends on agriculture for their livelihoods. Our tea, coffee, horticulture, and livestock sectors generate essential foreign exchange, ensure food security, and sustain millions of livelihoods. Minerals and other extractive industries also remain significant, providing vital revenue for many African nations and anchoring fiscal stability. This dual reality shows clearly that Africa's growth path cannot be either or proposition. We cannot choose strictly between investing in services or supporting our primary industries. That would be a counterproductive and false dichotomy. We must do both simultaneously. Allow me to share the Kenyan perspective, which is certainly relatable to many African economies. Our experience suggests that while investing in services sector is necessary, it is not sufficient to address the urgent challenges of poverty reduction and unemployment while achieving meaningful economic growth. For example, over the past 30 years, formal employment in Kenya has remained relatively stagnant at about 3 million people, while employment in the informal sector has grown dramatically from fewer than 2 million people in 1990 to 17 million people today. This reality reveals a fundamental truth that for millions of Kenyans working in the informal sector, GDP growth alone does not automatically translate to more money in their pockets. This is why you often hear phrases like, "We do not eat GDP." It is very common. I hear it every day. Even when our growth numbers are moving in the right direction, people are saying we are not feeling it in the pocket. When growth figures fail to deliver real impact on people's daily lives, then we need to rethink our strategy. For growth to have a direct and meaningful impact, especially for nearly 1 million young Kenyans who join the job market every year, we are compelled to design strategies that deliberately generate more jobs at the base of our society while still targeting substantial gross domestic product growth. That is the essence of the Kenyan government's bottom-up economic transformation agenda. It is a people-centered, grand strategy aimed at lifting millions out of poverty, creating new opportunities, formalizing the informal enterprises, and building a more equitable and prosperous nation for all of us. The bottom-up economic transformation agenda plan is built on 5 pillars: modernizing agriculture, formalizing micro, small, and medium enterprises, building social, affordable, and market housing programs, expanding our digital superhighway, and ensuring that universal health coverage becomes a reality for the majority. Each of these pillars was chosen for its potential to transform livelihoods, stimulate inclusive growth, and strengthen our economy from the bottom up. The implementation framework adopted a value chain approach designed to reduce the cost of living, expand revenue base, increase foreign exchange earnings, create decent jobs, and ensure broad-based growth. By addressing every link in these chains, from production through trade and markets into financing and public-private partnerships, infrastructure and platform development to skills and enterprise, we are building resilient systems that unlock Kenya's vast potential while delivering real and tangible benefits for every citizen. In Kenya today, we are modernizing agriculture to increase productivity, enhance food security, and develop agro-processing value chains that add value and create decent jobs. We are also advancing industrialization to build competitive manufacturing capacity, substitute imports, diversify exports, and anchor resilient local supply chains. We are supporting micro, small, and medium enterprises to transition into the formal economy, unlocking access to finance, access to markets, and building skills. For instance, through our affordable housing program, we are currently building 150,000 housing units across the country, financed with locally mobilized resources. This initiative has already generated more than 250,000 jobs across the entire housing value chain, stimulating economic activity and livelihoods nationwide. And let me explain this for a moment. We have mobilized resources locally. If we were to borrow the money we are using in our affordable housing program, we would still be having meetings in capitals. We would not have started building the first house 2 years down the road. But today, we have signed contracts to build 150,000 houses. We have $2 billion of contracts signed. We have a pipeline of 700,000 houses. We have 250,000 young people working, and the numbers are growing every other contract when it is signed. It speaks to the power of what domestic mobilization of resources can achieve. Under the same program, about Kenya shillings 11 billion, that's about US dollars 85 million, has been specifically ring-fenced to support the informal sector, locally at home known as the Juakali sector, empowering artisans and small enterprises to benefit directly. I had an occasion to speak to one of the Juakali enterprises. These are people who in the past did not have an opportunity to make any useful contribution. The last contract they signed with our affordable housing program was a 720 million shillings program. That is what corporates, those are the kind of contracts corporates sign. But this is now available to small enterprises, companies that have 15, 20, 30 people. They now have scaled up their operations. At the same time, we are accelerating investments in high-value service sectors, such as ICT, financial services, logistics, education, and the creative economy to deliver the next wave of growth, employment opportunities, and societal health. Investment in consumer-facing sectors such as retail, hospitality, real estate, and digital commerce is also accelerating. Our expanding middle class, rapid urbanization, and digital connected youth offer strong fundamentals for sustainable consumer-driven growth. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya is home to one of the most advanced financial ecosystems in Africa, with mobile banking, digital payments, and fintech innovations that have expanded financial inclusion to over 84% of adult population, up from 26% in 2006. Our capital markets are increasingly active and liquid. Nairobi hosts regional operations for global banks, investment firms, and insurance companies. We are expanding these platforms through regulatory innovation, digital integration, and regional harmonization under the East African Community Framework. Just yesterday, we welcomed the Africa Finance Corporation into the Nairobi ecosystem. They will be setting up an office in Nairobi. Bupa Global Health will be setting up an office in Nairobi again. After this meeting, we will be signing on Lloyd's of London to join the Nairobi ecosystem, the oldest insurance company in the world. We just welcomed 2 months ago Teleperformers, who are the largest BPO company in the world. And that hub is growing. And that's why I say Africa, viewed holistically, is a continent of abundance, rich in cultural heritage and human capital. We must invest where our strength lies. Africa's opportunity is to build resilient, diversified economies that harness our natural capital as a platform for inclusive and sustainable growth. We have natural and strategic resources that have the power to drive the global economy. We possess approximately 30% of the world's known critical mineral reserves, including more than 70% of global cobalt, 47% of manganese, and significant deposits of lithium, graphite, and rare earth elements. These minerals are strategic assets for global energy and digital transition. Beyond minerals, Africa is rich in renewable energy potential, and Kenya is a leader in this space. Today, over 90% of our electricity is generated from sources that are renewable, and we are committed to reaching 100% clean energy by 2030. When I say 2030, it looks far. In the next 5 years, that's what I'm saying. So in the next five years, we want to be at 100%. If you are looking for a space for you to decarbonize your business, Kenya is the natural destination. On food security, Africa holds 60% of the world's uncultivated arable land, yet, as of 2023, accounted for only about 10% of global agricultural output and less than 5% of processed food exports. Investing in agriculture-led industrialization can enhance domestic food resilience and secure food and food security. According to estimates by the Africa Development Bank, FAO, and McKinsey, Africa's agribusiness market could grow from US $300 billion in 2010 to US $1 trillion in 5 years, that is in 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, Africa aspires to a fair and equitable share in the global economy. Now is the time to rewrite Africa's growth agenda, not as an echo of external prescriptions, but as a bold declaration of our own vision. A vision anchored in the ingenuity of our people, the richness of our resources, and the urgency to prioritize inclusive prosperity, resilience, and regional strength. We have a generational chance to build value chains that keep wealth on the continent, develop competitive industries, and create millions of jobs while shaping global supply chains from a position of strength. Unlocking this potential requires a multifaceted approach. Strengthening regional integration through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is essential to expand market access to over 1.4 billion people, reduce production costs, and enhance regional connectivity. Building resilient infrastructure is critical to supporting supply chains, trade corridors, and efficient logistics. Mobilizing green and private financing is also necessary to scale transformative projects across our continent. We are already witnessing powerful models of what is possible. The Manufacturing Africa program, spearheaded by the UK, is unlocking over sterling pounds 1.2 billion in foreign direct investment, with a job creation target exceeding 100,000 people. Kenya's own Africa Green Industrialization Initiative, launched at the COP28 in 2023, has grown from 6 green deals worth sterling pounds 3 billion to 91 deals valued at more than sterling pounds 28 billion, with the potential to generate over 130,000 jobs. We are accelerating the deal conversion cycle with a dedicated National Investments Committee model, which we intend to replicate and to champion at the Pan-African level together with our friends, the Africa Continental Area. And I hope my good friend Wamkele is in town, and we will be able to engage with him much later. Distinguished guests, one of the key indicators of Africa's ambition is the development of flagship infrastructure projects such as the Nairobi Railway City project. Shortly, I will announce the expression of interest for this development, offering a unique opportunity to engage in a flagship public-private partnership program. Covering over 400 acres, Nairobi, in the heart of the city, Nairobi Railway City is envisioned as a transit-oriented development with integrated commuter rail, bus rapid transit, and pedestrian infrastructure. It will feature a multi-purpose arena, conference facilities, hotels, and retail spaces, aiming to establish Nairobi Railway City as a vibrant, round-the-clock business and entertainment hub. It will also include an innovation and knowledge district for tech startups and research and development hubs. It will provide sustainable, affordable housing to meet the demands of rapid urbanization in Kenya, while ensuring seamless and cost-effective urban mobility. This project is set to transform our capital city and create 10,000 employment opportunities at its core. I am informed that the Nairobi City Investment Facilitation Desk will be available today and throughout this forum to plan site visits and one-on-one meetings to address inquiries and support investment opportunities. Allow me to say 3 final things. By way of, positioning Africa, and more specifically Kenya, in the investment space. We have been deliberate in stabilizing our economy and making sure that there is predictability for investors and for people who want to venture into our continent. Being a democratic country, being a country based on the rule of law, and ensuring that every investor is assured of security of their investment, and ensuring that we have a stable economic space. We have, over the last 2 years, provided a predictable and stable economic environment where you can not only invest, but you can also repatriate your profits or your investment at will, anytime, without any difficulties. Just for numbers, inflation 2 years ago was at around 9.6%. We have since expanded our food security, ensured that we have created a much more stable environment. Today, inflation is at 3.8%. It's come down by almost half. We have equally ensured that we have a stable currency that ensures that investors can predict what is coming tomorrow and in the future. The largest economy in our continent, Kenya is now the 6th largest economy in Africa. This is numbers given to us by the IMF, and I'm sure some of their staff are in this room. That gives you the confidence that you are investing in a space, and this is the experience we want to share across the continent, so that this should not just be happening in Kenya, it should be happening across Africa. And we are working with colleagues in the framework of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to make sure that the experience in Africa is uniform. Let me also say this, that as we do that, we are also looking at how do we do more with what we have, so that we create a much more predictable environment in our continent. Sometimes when you try to look for solutions from outside, when the solutions are inside, you fail because you are looking for solutions in the wrong place. It is the reason why some of the programs using innovative and creative means, you can always find solutions that stabilize and create opportunities for investment, both locally, for local investors, and also for foreign investors. I will give you 3 examples. Number one, in our housing program, as I told you earlier, we decided that we are going to mobilize local resources. After we have mobilized local resources, there is also an opportunity now to securitize those local resources so that even investing members of our society, whether they are local or foreign, can also have an opportunity to leverage on the resources that we have put together, so that we can also create investment opportunities. A second example is our health. We decided also that health is such a critical aspect of our social infrastructure that we do not want to rely on resources that we have no control over. A case in point is when there were cuts on USAID and all the other development partner resources, it was necessary for us to think outside the box. So we decided in Kenya that we're going to move away from depending on foreign resources to run our health infrastructure. We decided that we are going to do this using locally mobilized resources. Today, we have moved people on health insurance from 7 million in 2 years to 24 million homes. Again, using locally mobilized resources. But we have also created opportunities for those in the manufacturing sector of health equipment. Now we are creating investment opportunities for manufacturers. We've sat together with the manufacturing community, and instead of us buying all this equipment, whether they are MRIs or CT scans or other equipment for hospitals, we've now agreed with them that this is not trade, this is investment. You bring your ICT equipment, you bring your CT scan, you bring your MRI, place it in our hospitals. It is your investment. We will pay you as we use those equipments. Fee for service. And everybody has found an ecosystem that makes sure that even in social services like health, we have created investment opportunities so that public and private can come together for the betterment of society and for a win-win outcome. Those of us looking for social services, we get. Those of you looking for investment opportunities, you have a chance. That is the kind of innovation that we are working with the private sector to make sure that we do this together. Let me conclude by giving you one final example. Our roads infrastructure was suffering cash flow and challenges in making sure that we do more on the road sector. We decided to securitize our assets, the assets that we have. And we raised $1.3 billion using our local assets. Not debt on government. We didn't have to carry it on our balance sheet, but it is doing the job for which those assets were intended. Again, working with the private sector, and we are now going to be listing some of those bonds in the Securities Exchange so that other investors can also have a bite of the cherry and come to the party. As we do our roads, there is also investment opportunities across. I am saying this just to give you an idea of what kind of investment opportunities are there that are not traditional, not the usual, you know. And we are looking at working with friends, partners, investors, especially from the private sector, to help us deliver on public goods using private sector money, but with a return for investors. In closing, I call upon all African leaders, investors, innovators, and citizens to collaborate and build relentlessly. Let us harness our natural capital for growth and generational transformation. Let Africa rise not as the world's resource warehouse, but as the engine of global progress. I thank you all, and God bless you. Thank you very much.